Episode 2 has to do with a tradition, something to do with oiling creaking doors. And Fred has this picture that shows a ghost walking around. So there's this whole idea that ghosts exist. For this tradition of fixing creaking doors, oiling them, people have to do it in pairs, and they have this like event where they pick the people how they are going to be paired. So Velma rigs that picking of how people are going to be paired because she wants to end up being stuck with Fred so that she can get to know what that pick is about. Turns out that that ghost that was in the picture that Fred has is of a ghost, and the ghost was basically Norville in a costume, and he was using it to go to the police station to snatch some journals that belong to Dr. Edna Purdue. Dr. Edna Purdue is Norville's grandma from season 1. So basically, he stole those journals because he's basically hallucinating about Fred's mom, because it's because of him that she died. So he keeps having these hallucinations of her, and then he's researching on how to stop these hallucinations, and someone is killing men associated with these Dr. Purdue's journals. Basically, that's what the whole story is about. Daphne and that new chick, her name is Amber, I believe. They go to the morgue because, as I said, there's this whole storyline of them trying to grease the hinges of creaking doors, which is so stupid. And they end up in a morgue going to grease the hinges of the doors in the morgue, and they end up seeing the two bodies. One is of this teacher from episode 1 and the sheriff, and their dicks had been removed. Yeah, so their dongs have been removed. And then Fred, who apparently had turned to Jesus, he gets to know that you have to pay tithe, which is 10%, and that makes him say, F that, no more Christianity for him. The brother of the sheriff who died starts running for the position of sheriff, and that is episode 2. Episode 3 has to do with the fact that Velma's mom and Fred's dad hook up. So Velma now, she hates rich people. I believe that was also highlighted in season 1. Now, because her mom and Fred's dad are now hooking up, she has to go to Fred's dad's house. They have this very annoying musical.
Mother just died, have you no remorse? Son, I can't copulate with the corpse.
And apparently there's also a science fair happening at school, and Fred is trying to learn where toast comes from. Yeah, so his whole project is about toast, and Fred's dad helps Velma win the science fair by inviting Neil deGrasse Tyson, which was meant to be comedy. Even though she didn't want to be in the fucking competition, she ends up winning. And Fred ends up saying, I wish my dad helped me the way he helped Velma. And the dad shows up and says, well, something, something, you're my son, something, something. They hug it out and they reconcile. And then Norville uses shock therapy to try and make his hallucinations go away, which removes his empathy for a while. And then he ends up telling his dad, Norville ends up telling his dad that he's a loser for smoking weed, and the dad puts them in detention. And that is episode 3. Episode 4, Daphne is now very tight with Amber, and Amber is like this gothic cult chick, so Daphne joins the cult. Norville isn't hallucinating anymore. Apparently, his hallucinations are not even hallucinations, he's being haunted. So the gang basically says, let's have a seance where they summon the ghost of Fred's mom. Velma tries to prove that Daphne doesn't believe in all this cult garbage. And then there's this whole side story about Velma's dad reliving his high school days, which doesn't affect the plot that much. And in this episode, you notice that Mindy Kaling is really obsessed with Beyonce, because you hear all these Beyonce songs and Beyonce references. And also in episode 1, there's a part where they're talking about soulmates, and she says that she doesn't have a soul, but she's only filled with song by Beyonce, some bullshit like that.
Sure, the sentiment of a soul is nice, but the only immutable essence inside of me is Beyonce's incomparable If I Were a Boy.
I also noticed that Norville's dad is just, the way he's drawn is just older Shaggy, if you look at it carefully. There was this teacher who died. Norville happens to go to his desk and find this file about the Crystal Cove Asylum where he sees this anagram. An anagram is a word which, if you rearrange it, forms a new word. So the anagram is basically Dr. Edna Perdue, and Norville basically realizes, oh, my grandma is probably still alive at the Crystal Cove Asylum. And that is episode 4. That one felt like the biggest waste of time, in my opinion. It could have just lasted 10 minutes, that episode. And episode 5 is Velma finds 2 coroners dead, and Daphne goes with Norville to the Crystal Cove Asylum. They find Dr. Edna Perdue is there, and Velma posts some photos that cause outrage and want the chicks who are in the cult to be burnt. So, and they end up being put like where witches are burned. And basically, on the Dr. Edna Perdue side, she is still alive and she has created a spa for brains. Basically, when she removes brains out of people, when they're outside the body, they're able to like be refreshed, and the people are able to improve mentally, apparently. And Velma tries to stop the mob from burning the witches because she didn't intend for that type of outrage to happen. Then the mob takes her and her mom and puts them on the lynching podium. And then she ends up posting photos of the victims, the men who died, and posting that they had big bulges before their dongs were removed. This causes the mob to become very insecure and they all start walking away. There's this one really stupid scene where she removes her glasses, and then her glasses cause like this ray of sunlight to basically start a fire like a magnifying glass, and yet I'm sure Velma's glasses don't work that way, but okay. And Daphne and Dr. Edna Perdue swap brains, and they show the priest dying, and that's the end of episode 5. I'm telling you, watching it is much more painful than me giving you a recap. In episode 6, Velma ruins Dr. Edna Perdue's brain fluid mix, because what happens is Dr. Edna Perdue says that the girls who are just in the jar, they are going to die if they don't get their fluid changed. So, as I said, Daphne and Dr. Edna Perdue switch bodies so that Dr. Edna Perdue can go as Daphne to go and save the brains. And then Velma asks her dad to talk to Gigi's dad. Gigi's dad is a soldier. So Velma basically says that she's planning to join the army soon and she needs a tour of the base. But she's really just doing this because she wants to go and scout the Scooby labs, where the Scooby project from season 1 was happening. Basically so that she can help Dr. Edna Perdue get that new brain fluid mix. Meanwhile, remember, Daphne's brain was removed, and then Dr. Edna Perdue is now walking around as her. So wherever Daphne's brain is, she ends up getting invaded by some cockroaches. Later on, Dr. Edna Perdue confesses that she still has more brain fluid, but she just sent Velma to the base so that she can know if the Scooby project has been reactivated. They end up saving the brains, but at that exact moment, I started getting a very bad headache and my own brain cells were dying. Earlier, Fred pretends to be a priest. He listens to a confession, and the lady on the other side of the booth, they end up exchanging numbers. And later on in the episode, while Fred is in court, I don't know for what reason exactly, that old lady that Fred was talking to calls and claims to be the murderer. And the cockroaches steal Daphne's brain. And Dr. Edna Perdue basically stays in Daphne's brain, and that's episode 6. Most of the writing is just and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Episode 7 is because the serial killer is a woman, as you heard on the phone. The sheriff says, let's put all the women in the mines because the serial killer is a woman, just to eliminate the women. And then Daphne, remember, her brain is in this jar. She goes on like this subconscious memory journey, exposing that she cheated on Velma, and then by making out with Amber. And then Norville takes Fred to meet Dr. Edna Perdue to prove that Fred's mom was not haunted, because Fred believes that the mom was only a killer because she was haunted by the ghost of Shaggy's grandma, of Norville's grandma. And then Velma concludes that the serial killer used this voice changer thing, meaning that the killer is not necessarily a woman. It could still be a guy. And the women discuss while they're in the caves, and they point out that Velma's dad is connected to the victims. And then Daphne meets up with Velma and does not confess that she cheated. And that's episode 7. Episode 8, the baby, basically Velma's like stepsister baby, and Velma's dad, they saw Daphne cheating. They tell Velma, and then there's this school trip where they're on a bus trip to Sacramento. When they are in that place where they are visiting for the trip, Olive believes that the place is haunted, and tells Amber that she'll forgive her for hooking up with Daphne if she just makes the ghosts go away. And then Amber is like, I didn't hook up with Daphne. What you guys saw was we were planning to curse Velma so that Velma can never find love again. Some BS like that. And then Gigi's dad, the army guy, shows up on the field trip. He explains his side about the Scooby project. Basically, from the explanation, Velma deduces that the killer could be a talking dog. And then at that moment, a talking dog attacks the bus, and the bus tires and causes a crash. That's episode 8. Episode 9, Velma is kidnapped, and the talking dog turns out to be Scrappy-Doo. And then it turns out that Amber works for Edna Perdue. Most of the issues in this show is that a lot of stuff happens without it being like hinted. Yeah, now, like for example, Amber working for Dr. Edna Perdue, it just pops out of the blue like this shocking revelation. But typically you hint at things before you reveal them, but here it doesn't work that way. Even Scrappy-Doo being the killer or being one of the killers, because they are like 2 killers or something, it's not hinted, just pops up out of the blue. Scrappy tells Velma that Gigi's dad is bad, and then he releases her. Fred's mom is actually a ghost, not a hallucination. And then Velma's stepmom agrees to marry Velma's dad, and then because she has accepted the proposal, they're going to have a bachelor party in a strip club. During that bachelor party, Scrappy comes out of the cake and he confesses to being the killer and that he was biting dicks off, which is super cringe. Fred stops his mom from trying to possess him by standing up to her. He becomes like a real man, and then her spirit moves on, and then she gets sucked into hell. And then lastly, we have episode 10, which is a very anticlimactic ending. There's a wedding, and Velma and Daphne switch bodies because Velma claims that, there's this guy who's part of the Scooby project called Uncle Scooby. So they don't know who Uncle Scooby is because he's like a masked person. So they say that Uncle Scooby is watching Velma. So they have to switch bodies so that Velma can go and investigate without being watched. And then it turns out that Sophie is Uncle Scooby, which was a very stupid revelation. When you do such revelations, it doesn't make sense, because like how it was never even hinted at. Scrappy-Doo attacks the wedding, Velma dies, and Velma's spirit tries to possess Scrappy, Scrappy dies, and then Velma becomes a ghost, and that's the end of the season. It's so dumb, my god. Number one thing I hated was just the recycling of ideas. For example, in season 1, it was girls getting attacked and their brains being removed. Here, it's men getting attacked and their dongs being removed. Number 2, a lot of these episodes felt like filler. Very little plot actually progresses the story. There's very, very few of the episodes actually progress the plot, the main plot of the killer or the mystery. Number 3, there are no interesting characters. At least in the first season, some of the characters felt actually like they had interesting personalities. Here, I think only Velma's mom felt interesting. The rest, Season 1 was so bad, it was entertaining. This one just felt bad and boring, in my opinion. And also the revelation of Scrappy-Doo being the killer and Uncle Scoob, just dumb. Everything is dumb. Everything is so dumb. At least in season 1, I actually felt the desire to get to know who the killer was, and the revelation of the killer being Fred's mom made some sense. But here, everything just comes out of left field. The only 2 positives of this show were The intros were pretty sick. The intros for each episode when they write Velma season 2, and they tried to do some character work on Fred regarding the trauma of his mom passing and some of the daddy issues he had. But other than that, everything else was less entertaining, less funny. There were some funny jokes in season 1, but this one is just flat, boring, and just very badly written. I mean, so was season 1, but season 1 I gave it like a 2. This one I give it like a -5. But anyway, that was Velma season 2. I could not sit and do reactions to each episode. I couldn't. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? You probably not watched this, but after my explanation, what do you think? Give me your thoughts, and then I'll leave my reaction to episode 1 on the screen, and then I'll see you in the next one.